Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to another episode of the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com, Jim West, and I'm here today with the Executive Director of the National Cybersecurity Alliance, the NCA. And if you haven't heard about them before this podcast, well, you're in for a treat because you're going to hear about a wonderful nonprofit organization that is doing tremendous work in the industry. And the Executive Director is here, Lisa Plaggemier. And so, Lisa,
Thanks, Jim.
please introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about who you are because people don't know, they need to know right now.
Yeah, as you said, I'm the executive director of a thing called the National Cybersecurity Alliance. We've been around for about 21 years now. We are actually the founders of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So if you've heard of that, every October, um, we've been doing that in partnership with DHS, now CISA, for a long, long time. And we have the world's best URL, staysafeonline.org. And our primary mission is education, awareness and education for not just for people in the field or people of working age, but people like my kids and people like my mom. So we're really translators. We're here to translate complex cybersecurity information into really relatable information with advice that is easy to understand and easy to implement. The more confusing and the more technical things sound, that is a barrier for a lot of people to actually change their behavior. So we're trying to inspire people to do things like not use the same password everywhere and enable MFA on all their accounts and things like that. So we have all types of education programs and campaigns that we run all year long,
Well,
not just
Cyber Awareness
October.
Month is always a huge month for a lot of organizations that have good security programs. I remember one Cybersecurity Awareness Month I was working for U.S. Army Central in Kuwait at Camp Airchon, Kuwait, and our authorizing official at the time, General Yi, wanted to create something special for the month, and we created a conference actually. They're called Cyber Bowl, where we use football themes to help teach, like about cyber defenses and cyber attacks and so forth. So it was a wonderful event that I got to create, and it was a wonderful experience. So I love Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and thank you for your organization for bringing that to the world. One of the things that's on your LinkedIn profile that really I love a lot because it doesn't fail no matter any conference you go to where hacker halted, or I don't want to kind of throw too many particular conferences on the bus, but every time anyone talks about hackers hacking anything in that realm, you get the vision of the shadowy face and the hoodie. So it says that you're on a mission to change that perception of hackers. Could you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, the bigger picture there for me is that I think for probably the last 20 years now, security people have been trying to use fear as a motivator to try and get people to change their behavior. If I just scare you enough, you won't click on that link or you'll stop using the same password on everything or whatever. The problem is that that fear is remote and intangible. So if you ask anybody who's trying to sell a product, ask anybody in sales or marketing or advertising, how hard it is to sell something that's intangible and remote. Like I can't see it, I can't feel it, I can't touch it. It's remote. It may or may not happen to me. The bad thing, that hacker may or may not get me someday. They're probably very likely thousands of miles away in another
Yeah.
country somewhere frequently. Um, it's intangible and it's remote, and so there's no matter how many scary photos you show, you're still working against those two things that obscure the threat. And people don't want to be scared. Nobody wants to go through life walking around being afraid all the time. Those are negative emotions. And particularly in a post-COVID world, I would say we've had enough negativity.
Yeah.
And so, what we try to lean into instead of those old tropes, the hackers in a hoodie or binary floating across the screen, or pictures of bugs and locks, and just
Goals.
so many
Yeah.
cliched images out there. So, instead of telling people like if you don't do this, something bad might happen, what we try to do is lean into empowerment and how much better you're going to feel, the peace of mind you're going to have if you've got MFA on all your accounts. Like you're not going to worry as much about this stuff anymore. So we just think that empowerment and that peace of mind message, and especially in today's world, like who doesn't need a little bit of peace of mind?
Yes.
Like I'll take it wherever I can get it. You tell me, you give me something that's going to help me worry less, then you can sign me up. We do a
So,
report every year that we call Oh Behave,
uh,
and we ask people about their emotions. We survey, this year it was 7,000 people around the globe. And we ask them about we have a list of emotions that we ask them to react to and, regarding cybersecurity. And there's already so much worry and frustration and intimidation. Like this is so complex that intimidates me. So that therefore I don't want to engage with it. And those are all things that lead to a lack of action. And
mhm.
that's the opposite of what we're looking for.
Oh,
So we try to lean into the positivity.
I think there's a lot more involved with this, of course. When you mentioned that figure of a hooded person, a hooded hacker, a lot of folks also get that stigma that it's probably a teenager, a bunch of kids just kind of rebelling
Yep.
against society and the government. But they don't understand that hackers look like people like you and me. They could look just like
Right.
your neighbor next door, and yeah, they can be anywhere from 7, 8, 9 years old to 60 something, 70 something years old. There's no set age for a hacker or what someone can do in your network. Even someone that's not technically proficient. It could just be someone just oopsies, and that could take down whole businesses and organizations. And so again, the
Days.
definition of hacker is to me is very broad and wide. And yeah.
It's also probably not a lone actor at this point. I mean, look at
Yes.
pig butchering, right? It's probably also not a human being. It's one human being with a bunch of AI and a couple hundred cell phones. Like it's so much more sophisticated than that. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the other things that those images don't convey is the sophistication of what you're up against.
Yeah, because it's not the
That's one
lone
of the
wolf.
reasons,
Yeah,
right?
they're
Right.
well, yeah.
That's why we made Kubicle. So if you haven't seen Kubicle series, it's Kubicle spelled with K's, and it's a comedic video series. We've had 9 million views now, and it's like
Nice.
watching an episode of The Office, but it's The Office of the bad guys. And the whole point was to show the number one, there's humor in that sort of work-a-day life of being a cyber criminal working in an office, but just to show that this is somebody's job. This
Mhm.
is somebody's job to steal from you or to hack you or to take your data, take your money, defraud you, whatever. So this isn't like somebody just doing this for fun. And
Mhm.
I think that's what kind of what hacking implies is they're just kind of playing around.
No, it's
It's not
serious
serious.
business.
And it is serious. And I think that also that doesn't get conveyed in that kind of imagery.
You mentioned earlier about the aspect of fear, because fear, for a lot of different purposes, is a huge motivator in a negative way, in a negative context. And it made me think
Right.
about like the war on terrorism, which obviously terrorism is something that we all should unite and fight against. But the general idea of terrorism, it's like the imagery, it's more abstract, right? And so I believe, like referencing 9/11, where a lot of Americans were very uncertain about the future, very fearful about if there was going to be more attacks. But immediately it was like we had a face to that evil. Osama bin Laden became
Yeah.
the target for us all to put in our heads because when you think of a shadowy figure in a hood, you can't really personify that as well as you can like with an
Well,
actual person. You can hate a person much more than you can hate an abstract figure.
about
So
the consumer campaign that happened after 9/11, the See Something, Say Something that started in
mhm.
New York City.
Yeah.
That's empowering.
Hmm.
That's like that's telling somebody you can be a hero,
Yes.
right? If you see something and you say something like you can stop the bad thing from happening, like that's super, super
Oh
positive
yeah.
in that messaging. And if I remember right, I don't remember there being a lot of negative imagery to go
No.
along with it. It was more of
No.
an empowerment message.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
really like that. That again, it reminded me of that during that time. So could you tell us a little bit? I mean, you mentioned cyber education, cybersecurity education, which is also near and dear to my heart because I've been a mentor to a lot of folks, and with Top Cyber Pro, we're trying to help even more people exponentially than 24/7 as a website, whereas an individual, we got to get sleep sometimes. But what are some of the other initiatives and missions of the NCA?
So when it comes to campaigns, we've got data cybersecurity awareness month every October. Then we have data privacy week or in January every year. Then we do all types of campaigns all year long. So it could be holiday shopping or back to school security tips, or probably one of our most popular campaigns is the safe use of dating apps and avoiding romance scams around Valentine's Day. And then this year we're doing an AI campaign for April Fools because with April spelled with an AI. Um, because that just seems to really go together. AI and social engineering and April Fools
Mhm.
just feels like an opportunity we shouldn't miss. So all different, whether it's, you're buying a home, buying or selling a home, how to avoid being defrauded in that process, anything about, scams and fraud and cybercrime, we kind of see it as one ball of wax because a lot of times the bad actors are the same. I mean, you've got, China behind a lot of this, whether it's pig butchering or whatever the scam or fraud is, romance scams, elder fraud, all those things. And the consumer doesn't really differentiate. I know in the professional world, we differentiate between
Mhm.
fraud and scams and cybercrime, but at the end of the day, the advice to the end consumer is still the same, and they don't really see the difference.
Mhm.
So we don't split that hair in our education because a lot of the things that we're teaching people to look out for are consistent. Then we have a program called See Yourself in Cyber. And this is a program we run with HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. It's got three elements. We have in-person and virtual events, career information events, LinkedIn writing workshops, resume writing workshops, things like that, virtual career fairs, in-person career fairs. We have a scholarship program that we partner with the ISACA Foundation on.
Nice.
And then we have a mentorship program. You mentioned mentorship. So we've got cybersecurity professionals that have signed up to mentor college students. Um, I'll tell you and your listeners a little secret. If you're a student anywhere, we probably won't turn you away from that mentorship program. You don't necessarily need to be at an HBCU, and you don't get kicked out of the program when you graduate. You can stay in there like the first year of your career when you also might have a lot of questions, especially first generation college students. That first year in your job, you can find yourself a little bit overwhelmed. So we have that program. Then we have a program called Cyber Secure My Business, and there's a lot of education out there for small businesses for their tech person or their tech
Mhm.
service provider. There's ways for them to get uh, technical training. We looked around and there's very little, especially instructor led, for the business owner or operator. So somebody who's non-technical, how do we teach them enough about cybersecurity for them to manage it as a function of their business? So we're really teaching risk and some basics about technology. And that's instructor led. It's remote, but instructor led. And then there's office hours with the instructor that people can ask questions. So in that we have an insurance company actually that is offering a discount on their customers' insurance, cyber insurance premiums if they attend the
Mhm.
class. It's really good for small business owners because they don't always know, they know enough about finance, for example, to have a good quality conversation with their accountant.
Mhm.
They don't always know what to ask their IT provider. They don't
Yes.
even, they're not even confident on how
It's
to
like if the
hire a
Wi-Fi is
good IT
working,
provider.
we're in business.
Yeah, I'm just gonna
That's
ransomware. Yeah, I'm just gonna assume that they've got that all handled, right? And they don't know how to ask questions, and not all providers are equal, so they do need to be asking questions. So that class, we looked around. There's nobody else out there doing anything like that, and we saw that communication gap between technical folks and non-technical folks, and we wanted to find a way to bridge that.
I tell
Um,
you what,
so that's
SMEs,
another
the
one of our
small to medium
programs.
businesses are a huge missed opportunity for a lot of,
Yep.
educational institutions and businesses, period, because a lot of things are marketed to, your Fortune 500s, right?
Mm,
But a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of the lifeblood of our economy is small to medium businesses, from sole proprietorships where you have a single person wearing all the
right.
hats, to small teams of 3+ people. And I tell a lot of folks, when we talk about like NIST cybersecurity frameworks and the NICE framework and all the frameworks that are out there, if you're a sole proprietor and you're like, let's say you're a plumber and you're just working at a home,
Too much.
out of a home office, you look at 100+
Yeah.
controls, you're lost from the get-go. It's just it
Yep.
feels like an elephant in the room, or just you're
You
just
don't even know what NIST is.
exactly. But there are
Yeah.
some good initiatives, like the Essential Eight that Australia has, I think is a phenomenal direction where they put out an Essential Eight controls that any small to medium business should look at. And I love
Mm,
things like that. They kind of boils it down to, hey, if you're
Right.
going to do anything, start with these, And one of the I got two publications coming out this year. One is actually Michelle Kaldenberg is actually the lead author. I'm contributing, but the one of them is basically it's RMF. For small to medium businesses, where we kind of picked, out of all the control process groups and families, we said, hey, if you're going to do anything in this group, here's the top three. And first one's the most bang for your buck. If you can do number two and three, even better, but just do the first one in each chapter. And but because that is a sector of industry that gets largely overlooked, or sometimes just outpriced because they can't afford managed services or SOC services, etc. And a lot of them go under the assumption that, hey, my internet provider's protecting me, and they don't realize they just
Yep.
provide the pipeline. You're out there in the wild west of the internet on your own. So I love that
Right.
the
Right.
NCA is addressing small to medium businesses because it's one of the biggest gaping holes and vulnerabilities in our industry. So kudos
Mhm.
to the National Cybersecurity Alliance for
Yeah.
doing that. Also, if anyone's watching this book going, okay, I want to pause and quickly Google for the series, the web series she was talking about, where they show you perspective from the hacker or any of the other links, they're going to be in the description below. So I'll save you the Google search because Lisa is providing me all of the links that we're going to have in the description below. So don't worry about having to get the spelling of anything right. The links are everything will be below. I would like, you do phenomenal work, Lisa, you and your organization. But let me just ask, what motivates you? Like, what drives you to, and one, like you said, trying to avoid going down that cliches and tropes of negativity and the tired things, the doom and gloom that cyber sometimes gets connected to. But what motivates you?
I think, well, so part of it is just since I was a child, I'm a goody goody. I'm a do-gooder. I don't like to see evil win. I don't like to see people be defrauded. I don't like to see data breaches happen. I want the good guys to win. Um, and then the other thing, when I first made the transition from, I was recruited out of marketing by a chief security officer. And I was like, what are you going to do with me? Like, this doesn't make sense. And he said, I can teach you enough about security that you can communicate these things in a way that's creative and interesting for people. He said, I can't take a security person and teach them creativity. Like, that doesn't work. So, when I remember my first full day in the job. I had been doing projects with the security team, but my first full day in the job, we had just been spun off from a big corporate parent, and we had four incidences in the first day.
Oh.
And I just remember going from incident call to incident call because I was responsible for writing the comms to brief executives. And just realizing that you have all these people fighting this good fight all day, and you have like, the enormity of everything that's happening in cyberspace, and then you got everybody else who, like my mom and my kids, who just kind of go about their day and don't think about it. And you just have this ginormous communications gap between cybersecurity professionals and the rest of the world. And you don't have enough people that are really good at telling the stories and getting engagement. And we're not here to make everybody into a cybersecurity professional. We're here to get people motivated to use technology in a way that's more responsible and more secure. And you've got to tell the stories in a way that's compelling and that inspires that behavior change that we talked about without using fear. And I think that huge, when I read stuff that I read every day that's happening, and understand some of the details, some of the geopolitical context, and then just think to myself, most people have no idea. Like, so what do I need to tell them? What do we think they need to know?
Mhm.
For them to protect themselves and their families and their organizations. So that, yeah, that until that gap is a little smaller, I got a reason to get up every day.
Awesome. I love that. Earlier you mentioned, about the different like holidays during the year, different life events that you
Mhm.
guys, address training and do campaigns for, which I love that. I love that it's a year-long thing. It just, cyber never sleeps, right?
Yep.
But one of the things I wanted to come back to is just the online safety and privacy. So, not to speak ill of Ed Snowden, but when he did a lot of revelations about certain government programs and information collecting on American citizens, it did drum up a lot of discussion around privacy. And generally speaking, you had two general camps of people. One group of people said, well, I'm not doing anything legal. What do I care? And then the other groups of people that were like the smaller group that actually cared about it, but yet they went right back to their social media platforms, posting their vacations while they're on vacation, posting things that are geotagged pictures that shows their addresses. Like people are just willingly consenting on a regular basis and sharing their lives to the internet, not realizing the downsides of that, because they wanted security, but yet they were basically offering up their privacy on a silver platter. What are some of the things that you would caution people? And again, we don't want to use the fear thing, but also, what are some of the things that you guys try to educate people about in regards to online safety and privacy?
We really go back to kind of our core four over and over again, even when we're talking about privacy. So that's using long, complex, unique passwords, which probably means you need the help of a password manager, enabling MFA everywhere you can, keeping everything patched and up to date, and looking out for social engineering. And whether it's phishing, smishing, like any of the various ways we're being defrauded these days. Um, if I mean, it's the old cliche, if it's not secure, it's also not private.
Mhm.
So we, at the end of the day, a lot of that advice still applies when you're talking about privacy. Trying to get people to change their settings on social media is a mountain to climb. I mean,
Yeah.
we preach about that a lot. I think I think while it's creepy to a lot of people, I mean, I come at this as a former marketer and I look at, you've got the whole world of data brokers and advertising and I don't think people will be creeped out when they start to think about all the data like that companies know about them and how that gets used. But I draw a really big line between what's malicious and what's marketing. And um, if I want personalized marketing, if I want dynamic content in an email newsletter that's based on my interests, and so the articles I get in my newsletter are different than what my spouse gets, for example, or I want restaurant suggestions when I go to a new city. So therefore, this app needs to know my location and have access to data about me to know what my preferences are. Like if I'm enjoying all those that personalization
Mhm.
that we take for granted these days, um, then how do I square that with how freaked out I feel when, how creepy it is when I see like just how much data companies have about me and how they're using it. And so I think I think that's why we don't see a lot of people taking steps because they're trying to find that balance. And as a society, I don't think we're there because we really, really enjoy the convenience and the you know, if I start shutting off access that different apps have to data that's on my phone, for example, my location, images, whatever it is, there's going to be some stuff that doesn't work the way I like it to work because it's convenient, because it's personalized, because it's something that I value. And so I think that's where people are really, and so I tend to draw the line at like, okay, is any of that malicious?
Mhm.
Well, no, this is a legitimate company trying to sell me something or coming up with a recommendation for me or whatever. And so it's a tough one. I mean,
Yeah.
I lived in Germany for a long time where they have the
Ah,
world's first data protection laws.
yep.
And I can tell you that I got really comfortable with that. And I really liked not getting robocalls and not getting junk mail and just not getting as much marketing as I was used to being hit with living in the US.
Mhm.
And and I don't know that I mean, and GDPR has been around for how long now? So
Yeah.
finally we have some states taking some action in the US. I just don't know that there is at the end of the day the appetite from the American public for the kind of privacy laws that we see
Yeah.
in other
Yeah.
countries.
I think, I
I mean, I
think,
hate to say it, but we
yeah.
kind of like the way
The
things
convenience,
work.
right?
We like the
It makes life
convenience. Yep.
better. The convenience kind of outweighs any
Yep.
of the risk right now.
Yep.
You mentioned Germany and the EU, and they've taken great strides when it comes to individual
Mhm.
privacy. They do take it very seriously in Europe, and like countries like Brazil, I think leads the world with the number of privacy laws on the books that they have in their country, and so forth. And then of course every region is a little different with their privacy laws. Like in Asia, if you start anyone is studying like to be a privacy professional, there's a CIPP certification, if I recall, that addresses privacy laws in different sectors of our business in the U.S. as well as overseas. But one of the things, I mean, you brought up Germany, just popped in my head. I remember those two groundbreaking cases. This might have been 7, 8 years ago now. But one of the cases was where they determined that an IP address is privacy information to the individual. And two, they had another case within the same year that internet is a basic human right. And I just found that really amazing that Germany was kind of leading the way with those two groundbreaking cases about 7, 8 years ago.
Look at their look at their history.
Mhm.
There's a case of, you know, a regime that kept a lot of records on people and did bad things with it.
Yeah.
So that's in their national consciousness.
Mhm.
And I lived there in the years after the Berlin Wall fell, and you could request a cop if you lived in East Germany or thought the Stasi had data on you, you could request your data file. You could see what the East German secret police were gathering about you as but part of reunifying the country and having more transparency. And so there's just a really long history there of how data can be abused and what the government should and shouldn't have access to. And so I could imagine if that was in our national psyche that way, we'd have very different laws today.
Totally agree with that. But I think the biggest thing that I would recommend to people just on the subject before we move on to the next topic is that people should just be a little bit, at least surface level aware about consent, about implied consent, opt-in consent. It's really important, at least,
Mhm.
as an individual, be armed with this, that every time you accept the terms and conditions, we know people aren't going to read the long legalese because those are done by
Right.
lawyers. They're not going to spend the time. And even if they did read it, two-thirds of it they're not going to understand. But at the end of the day, it's at least to be aware of what you are sharing because you do when you do post and anything that you actually type and links you share, you are revealing something, and you should just be cautious about what could be the negative downside of what information you're sharing. And so,
We have a really compelling presentation that we offer. So we work with a TikTok star that is known as Not Con Jr. And she does consensual doxing on TikTok. She's got million followers or so. So we actually will do a presentation for organizations. We have a speaker honorarium for it because each one is bespoke. And we take volunteers in advance to be consensually doxed. And then she'll go through those folks and pick the most interesting story, create a presentation, and then she and I will give it to an organization. Like, for example, we did it for Delta Airlines. They flew us to Atlanta and we did it for their employees. And it's really fun. And so we talk about like, well, here's the information she was able to find, and here's how she found it. And then I give the perspective of like, well, if I was somebody malicious, like if I was trying to social engineer you, like here's how I could use that information to say something that might make you believe me.
wow.
Um, so that's a lot of fun. So we offer that. There's a speaker request page on staysafeonline.org if you want us to give that to your organization.
I love that. Love that a lot. Um, we talked about cyber education. Obviously, stay safe online. The link is below. Has a wealth of articles and information and videos, and then a lot of stuff also on YouTube as well. But is there any other websites that you would recommend that throughout your career you said, hey, these are some good sites with some good information that you'd like to kind of shine a light on?
Big fan of the Identity Theft Resource Center, the ITRC. They've got some really good information on their website. They help people prevent and recover from identity theft. So they're another nonprofit that does some really great work, and they kind of have a step by if it's happened to you, they
Hmm.
kind of have a step-by-step guide of what to do. So there's some really great information there. A lot of government agencies have great information, like the CFPB and the FTC and the SEC, and but it tends to be hard to find because they're not out there doing a lot of social media posts and they're not doing advertising. They usually can't do a lot of search engine optimization or search engine marketing, so that makes it really hard for the public to find that information. I mean, even the Postal Service has great information on avoiding fraud and stuff like that. So The government does have, and of course CISA puts out their tip sheets and everything every October. We collaborate, so we run the Cybersecurity Awareness Month campaign together, and so the materials you'll see from us look very similar. Theirs has government branding, ours doesn't, but a lot of the guts of the content is the same because we want to make sure we have unity of message there, and we get more share of mind because we're all saying the same thing to everybody. But they have some good content as well. Um, yeah, those are probably the ones that I look to the most. I mean, there are some other um, cybersecurity nonprofits, and of course, like the daily news feed from some of the security publications. But as far as like websites with helpful information, ARP has really good information for seniors on security. They have a fraud hotline. You don't even have to be a member to use their fraud hotline. They'll help anybody. They get an insane amount of calls every week, and we
Yes.
know the good people over there that run that. Consumerreports.org has some good privacy and security content. They have a thing called, if I'm not mistaken, Privacy Planner. That's an app that you install that kind of helps you to reclaim some of your privacy. Um, so there's the important thing is that something sparks your interest so that you just go start looking and trying to educate yourself. I mean, the hard part in our line of business is getting people's attention on the topic to begin with. Once you start looking, there's a lot of resources out there, from us and other people. But it's trying to find what is the topic, what is the media, what is the thing that's going to grab your attention. And we are in a world where we are bombarded every day with information coming at us. And so how you cut through all that and find the hook that gets somebody interested to watch your video or read your article, and then how do you get them to actually change their behavior?
Change the behavior, take the action.
That's really the hard part.
Yeah.
It's not we don't suffer from a lack of information out there.
Yeah.
It's really getting people's attention and then inspiring the behavior change is the hard part.
So one of the last things you mentioned about the AARP and the elderly, there was a movie that came out. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, The Beekeeper with Jason Statham, and for folks that have seen the movie, he dealt some brutal action-packed justice to these phone scammers. And in the
And then there's
context of the movie,
Thelma, the little
huh?
old lady. Thelma,
Yes.
have you seen that one? Yeah,
Yeah. And so,
same kind of thing.
everybody watching this, I'm sure there's not a lot of elderly folks watching this podcast, but everybody that would be watching this podcast, if you're at any age and you still have your parents that are still with you, still alive, you owe it to yourself to at least,
Yep.
have that conversation, a little bit about safety because they're going to get bombarded with phone calls, messages if they're just now learning how to use a tablet at home and starting to get on the internet. That's a big group of people that goes largely unaddressed. We talked earlier about small to medium businesses. I'll get often overlooked when we talk about these big security frameworks and these big cyber initiatives. But then we have a large population of our elderly that are everyday victims to fraud and scams. And so I implore anyone watching this is if you have one, two parents, even your grandparents and other elderly family members, have a conversation with them because now that you have the information, how can you not share what you've learned or what you're learning right now to protect yourself to also protect the family members. So I would definitely highly encourage everyone to have those kind of conversations.
Putting together a campaign right now for aging adults that it will have a direct mail element to it. We're fundraising right now, and hopefully that'll launch later in 2025. But we're thinking through some of the family dynamics that can happen. People like me can get frustrated with mom as you're trying to teach her to do something.
Yeah,
So having like a workbook and some really quick, like QR codes to some really short how-to videos, like how to turn on MFA on Meta and things like that. If I say that to somebody my kid's age, like they'll go figure it out. If I say that to somebody like my mom, she doesn't even know where to start.
yeah,
So we're putting together, you really have to boil the ocean. You really have to keep it simple and very
very simple.
targeted, and maybe have that visual aid, like that direct mail piece, that printed material. But there'll be a microsite, there'll be all kinds of different elements to go with that. We have some videos that are on our YouTube. There's a series called Mom Don't Click That. And that is interviews with adult security professionals and their aging loved ones, facilitated by a kind of a talk show host who's since been on Colbert. He's a pretty funny guy. And we tried to bring some empathy to the situation, right? Because it's super, super challenging for
Yeah.
them. And a lot of them, like my mom, they get super excited about using technology. You can't tell them like just don't use it.
Yeah.
Like they see a lot of promise.
They want to be on
She's not
TikTok
very mobile.
too.
Yeah, and this is a way for her to stay in touch with people, even at a stage in life where she's not very mobile. It brings the world to her
It
doorstep.
does.
Problem is it also brings the hackers to her doorstep.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but they have the highest, if you look at the FBI data, they have the highest dollar losses from cyber crime of any demographic.
Mm. Well, Lisa, we could talk for hours and hours about cybersecurity. I know with your, very distinguished career and experiences, we could have stories for days, but I do want to value and respect your time. If you would humor me, I have a segment of every podcast interview where I like just for brevity, because we've been talking a lot of cyber tech, but it's just for fun. It's a quick fire round of questions where there's no right or wrong answer. So if
Okay,
you're ready, I'll start firing a couple questions away. All right, first
go
one
for it.
up, cake or pie?
Cake.
Here's a good one. Star Wars or Star Trek? This splits the room.
Oh, Star Trek.
Star Trek, okay.
But if I really want to frustrate my husband, I mix the metaphors of both because he's all Star Wars. And so just to play into how stupid I am about Star Wars, I'll just mix all the metaphors together from both series and he can't
Have you
stand
seen the
it.
meme with Patrick Stewart where it says you're a wizard, Harry, and attributes him as Gandalf from Lord of the Rings? That frustrates everybody, right? Um,
Yeah, he's got the Star Wars Lego collection, so he's
okay.
hardcore.
Is a
Yeah.
hot dog a sandwich?
Oh boy. I don't think so.
Okay. All right.
I mean,
Um,
I'm from Detroit. It's a coney.
okay. All right. Here's a good question. What is your most favorite book you've read of all time, and what is the last book you've read?
Well, I went to church last night, so the last book I read was probably a few pages in the Bible.
All right.
Uh, and I guess I'd have to say that's my all-time favorite. I don't know how it applies to the only way I can think of that applies to security is back to my sort of like do-gooder mentality of I think I think I think most security professionals that I know have a really clear ethical compass. Like we are faced with the difference between good and evil every day. And there's a lot of things in the world where there's not that clarity. Um, but I think it's security. It tends to be, if I look at something like pig butchering, uh, like I don't think anybody with a conscience or a clear moral compass can look at that, any bit of that, and say, oh well, that's not a like situation. It's a like, no, that's really evil.
Hmm.
People being human trafficked into scamming people like my mom. Like there's moral clarity there.
Yeah.
And so I think and I've seen so many situations when I was part of a security team where companies are faced with something that maybe your policy doesn't 100% address, and you're trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. And a lot of times that's what security teams are faced with, whether it's like how transparent you need to be about something or just what the right thing is to do in any given situation. And I can't think of any other area of the business world where you're kind of faced with those ethical, moral sort of questions or, situations on a daily basis than in the world of cyber.
We have challenges teaching AI, and I think there's no industry standard yet or agreement across the various groups that are trying to make these decisions on ethics in AI for various reasons, which
Mhm.
not enough time to get into in this conversation. But something earlier you mentioned about Germany's history. That brings a good discussion about ethics and what's legal, right? And laws. We always want to think what's ethical is legal, but sometimes they're not the same. At one point in Germany's history, it was legal for them to put a bunch of people in a room and gas them to death, and but of course, it was not ethical and definitely not moral at all. And so, but I love your choice in the book because again, it is a book that provides a lot of guidance on following
Mhm.
morals and so forth. And like you said, being a good
The
person,
other
right?
thing, the other thing I think about too is like sometimes it can be really heavy to work in cyber because you see a lot of bad things happening around the world and it gets really dark really quickly
Yes.
and you got to have hope.
Yeah.
right? You have to have hope that there's, for me, that it's the hope that there's a higher power in control,
Yeah.
even though the world looks like it's going to hell in a
You
handbasket.
know,
So yeah,
I just in the past 2 years I saw an animated GIF because for a lot of times we don't think about unless you're really into space and NASA's missions and just in general know a little bit more about space than the average person. But as an average person with average knowledge about space, I just remembered the little rotating maps and the 2D kind of layout of our solar system and I just knew we revolved around the sun, but I didn't know exactly what that looked like because it's like why did they launch the rockets this way and they got to spin around? I kind of knew it, but I didn't know why. And then when you start seeing things like that, there was an animated GIF that showed all of our solar system doing this really weird curving movement, spiraling movement. I
complexity.
was like, now I understand why they launch rockets the way to do it. And now I understand why certain times of the year you want that shorter distance for launching, space probes, satellites, etc. The windows of time. We're talking about Mars exploration. There's like certain windows of time that if you don't hit that window, you're gonna have to wait. So, but yeah, it's interesting that like, the more information you get, like you mentioned earlier, information is empowering. So as you start to learn more, you empower yourself, and then hopefully you take that information, learn, empower your parents, empower your family, empower your neighborhood with that information you learn. We could definitely talk all day, but I want to kind of give you an opportunity outside of the work you do with the NCA. Is there other projects, nonprofits that you're involved with that you're supportive of, or that maybe you don't directly work with, but you just want to shine a light on them? This is an opportunity for you to kind of say, here's some wonderful organizations out there. They don't necessarily have to be cyber related, but things that you are passionate about outside of your day job.
There's one in Austin, Texas called Allies Against Slavery, and they are actually it's combating human trafficking, and they are working on gathering data because we really don't have enough data in the U.S. We don't understand enough about the scope of the problem. And so that's their mission, is a very technical mission and a very human problem, but just trying to get good reporting and good data so that policymakers and law enforcement and everybody can do a better job.
And obviously,
Uh,
Texas, I'm a Texas native myself, and Texas has the longest border with our southern country, Mexico, where there's a lot
mhm.
of human trafficking just in that backyard, if
Yep.
you will. And so,
Yeah.
definitely, that's a wonderful organization to. And please provide me that link so that people want to learn about that organization and
Sure.
the work they do. They can click it below. Is there any other organizations you'd like to mention at the moment, or personal
Come to
projects?
mind. The
Okay.
personal projects. Uh, yeah, I have a couple, but I'm not sure how
Okay.
interesting they are to your listeners.
Well, by all means, if you'd like to share, it's up to you. And but also before we go, I would like to highlight some of the events you're going to be at this year because you're an avid speaker. You're requested at a lot of conferences, so I do want to kind of end with that in the final message. But yeah, what are some personal projects, or what are some things about Lisa that the world may not necessarily know about?
Oh gosh. Well, my German's getting a little rusty, but I would still say I'm a relatively fluent speaker of German. Uh, I do my best to work out at a pretty intense gym 4 mornings a week. That's about it. I
All right.
have
Given that we did
five
talk about
kids.
privacy earlier, so that's good
Yeah,
enough.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
No, I'd say the biggest priority for me right now is trying to put together some really compelling talks for all those events that you talked about. Like what we have in the hopper right now for RSA, I think is going to be really, really good. And then I frequently speak at Secure World and other industry conferences. And so we're just building on the things that we've learned through our O Behave report, our annual report on security behaviors and attitudes every year, a lot of data in there to talk about, and just trying to keep people interested and entertained, and hopefully give them some information that they can use in their jobs too.
Wonderful. Well, I will say kudos for being a creator, and imagination is one of the most powerful gifts to be able to use because again, when you could take something that's complex, boring, mundane, and make it relevant and exciting, and most of all, if it can be entertaining, it becomes more memorable. And I think that humor and entertainment is definitely the way to really captivate people and get them to really think about it. Because if it's just fleeting, that this is going to go in one ear out the other, or the death by PowerPoint happens to all of us. But I think when you make engaging content, and I love some of the things you mentioned, which we'll have all the links below about the video series, showing the perspective of the hackers, having the don't click, what's it called? Don't click that, mom, don't click that. Uh,
Don't click that.
I love it. I love it. Is there any final message that you would have for people, whether they're people considering getting into cybersecurity or people that are interested in anything that you had talked about on this episode? Is there any last word that you'd give to those people watching?
I would say whether you're a student and you're looking for a mentor or you're working in an organization, you're just looking for materials that you can share. So if you don't have the capacity to make up your own campaigns, we've got campaign kits and volunteer materials that people can use in their organizations. So I would say go to staysafeonline.org and just get on our mailing list, and then you'll be in the loop whenever anytime we publish new materials that people can use, it'll be in our email newsletter.
Awesome. Well, folks, click the links below, sign up on that mailing list. Don't try to reinvent the wheel yourself. The wheels have already been invented. They're stacked up in the warehouse on Stay Safe Online already for you. So, Lisa, thank you and your team for doing great work in the industry. And again, consider this an open invitation to come back on a podcast anytime.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.